Welcome back to Big Mouth and welcome to the DCEU Daily. Before we start today, I want to talk to you about something. There's many Warner Brothers social media accounts talking about Asian hate. If you're like me, a fan of the Restore the Snyderverse community, what you shouldn't be doing is hashtagging Restore the Snyderverse as a quote tweet or commenting on these posts. Because, fighting against Asian hatred is very important, and it's much more important than any film franchise. Yes, DC is important to me. The Snyderverse and restoring it is important to me. But we've got to be respectful. And by, hashtagging Restore the Snyderverse, commenting on this Stop Asian Hate post that Warner Brothers are doing, or Jason Kilar's doing, it's basically, if you do that, what you're doing is you're proving Ann Sarnoff's point for her. You're making our movement look toxic. And let's not forget something very important here. Zack Snyder has got Asian children. He's not going to thank you for this. Now, Asian hatred is a real thing, right? Now, we've known, thanks to President Trump blaming China for the COVID pandemic, that Asian people all over the world have been attacked, sometimes even killed, being blamed for the pandemic. This is not just racist and brutal and hate at its deepest form. We need to stand with all Asian people. I love all people around the world, but I judge people on an individual basis, on their character and their personality. When I see someone, I don't see a black person, I don't see an Asian person. You may say, I'm lying, I'm telling you the truth. And I don't judge people on what they represent in terms of their culture, what they identify as. I've said that so many times on so many different platforms, I'm not sure if I've said it here. But what's happening to Asian people around the world right now, and the hatred that they're getting, is purely wrong. And we must all stand together to stamp this hatred out. So this channel and me, Mick Meanus, Big Mouth, whatever you want to call me, stands against Asian hatred. And I stand alongside my Asian mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, or whatever else they identify as. So yes, welcome to the DCEU Daily. Today we're talking Flashpoint versus the Snyderverse. So, obviously, this year has been a massive year so far for the DC Extended Universe, but kind of represents what a weird franchise it is. We've got Zack Snyder's Justice League now streaming on HBO Max and different platforms across the world. A wonderful movie, but it's not canon within the DCEU franchise. That's part of the insanity that we're dealing with right now. So, later on this year, we've got James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, which is canon to the rest of the DC Extended Universe and canon to David Ayer's Suicide Squad. Now, it's a sequel, but it's not a direct sequel. It's a standalone sequel. And there's a big difference. And it's not a reboot like some sites and journalists are saying, but it is canon of the DCEU. And basically, from what Zack says, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is literally canon to Joss Whedon's Justice League movie, Justice League. Now, I'm going to explain this to you because I'm a very passionate Snyderverse fan as well. And sometimes my heart rules my head. So I want to talk about this. Why are the future DCEU movies going to be canon to that movie? It's not because they're proud of it. It's not because that's what they particularly want to do. But certain issues like Amber Heard not having this, classy British accent in James Wan's Aquaman. And she's pretty much the same character as she is in her cameo in Justice League. These are the things that are canon, right? It's very confusing, isn't it? It's like Voco, very different in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Long hair, kind of, his body language is different. He kind of talks differently. Doesn't have the bravado and the confidence he has in James Wan's Aquaman, because in James Wan's Aquaman, he's like Orm's right-hand man, right? So there's lots of different things. And it's really confusing for normies. This situation is a mess. And I've explained yesterday and so many times how this mess originated. So I'm not going to do that again. So this is the reason why they want Justice League to be canon. Because by making Zack Snyder's Justice League canon, it gets confusing. Because if Zack Snyder's Justice League is canon, it's impossible for Zack Snyder's Justice League to be canon to James Wan's Aquaman. It's just impossible. There's just too many things that don't connect with those two films. Unfortunately, because in James Wan's Aquaman, they decided, and I think this was a Jeff Johns thing, not a James Wan thing, by the way, where certain things would be different to Zack Snyder's Justice League. So things are really, really messy. And so as we continue to restore the Snyderverse, some of us will support the rest of the DCEU and some of us won't. I will. Because even though I'm a fan of Zack Snyder's DCEU and his films, and I love the guy and I love his trilogy thus far, I'm not a Zack Snyder zealot or acolyte. I'm not just here for Zack. Now, that might offend people. I may lose even more subscribers. I'm losing subscribers right now since I did that whole video that I didn't like James Gunn's Suicide Squad trailer. I said in yesterday's video that actually the trailer's warming to me, and I've always been excited for James and his vision of Suicide Squad, because nobody in the industry knows more about the Suicide Squad in the graphic novels than James Gunn. So for me, that's very, very exciting. Right. So, big year this year, but it's not the biggest. I expect James Gunn's Suicide Squad to get rave reviews and make a lot of money for Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Media as an entity. I have no doubt about that. And that idea from Walter Hamada to bring in James was a very good idea for the business and for the future of the DCEU, because James Gunn is a very talented writer, director, storyteller. Because James Gunn's comic book movies are a bit like a Rocky movie. You come out feeling 100%. You feel inspired, don't you? You feel that you can fight anyone. You feel awesome after a James Gunn comic book movie, right? So, and that's cool, because I'm here for all different interpretations of the DC cinematic universe. So, big decision. The idea to bring in Matt Reeves to do a Batman movie was a very good idea. Now, again, it was very difficult for Matt. Matt wanted to do his own thing. He didn't want to do a Ben Affleck movie. And that's his priority, because he has his own vision. And we're fighting for Zack to do his vision. And if we're talking about auteurs getting, the freedom to do what they want to do, then we should back Matt on that. And he's really cast a brilliant actor. From the first promo trailer, the thing looks amazing, and I can't wait to see it. Now, that's been released in March. I still think that date may change, even though BVS was released. Was it released in March originally, March the 25th? So it may stick there. But the big movie for the DCEU and the future of the DCEU is this Flashpoint movie. All of a sudden, this is the film where they're going to change everything. They're going to, basically what they're going to do, they're going to turn this franchise in a kind of open-ended, connected tissue. But it's not just that it's going to connect with the rest of the DCEU. It's going to connect with everything DC live action ever made. Once Barry Allen goes to save his mum, and he creates this new world, this new Earth, this new universe by accident, but then he puts it right, things will change. Things that change within the movie will stay changed. Now, this is an idea to kind of get rid of earlier elements of the DCEU they don't want to deal with. So basically, Snyder's work. So I don't know if Man of Steel and that universe and that Superman, Henry Cavill's Superman, will exist after Flashpoint. Now, it could very easily happen that even Ben Affleck's Batman won't exist after you finish watching Flashpoint. He's going to be in the movie, but he may vanish from existence, right? So these are things that might happen. Now, this doesn't stop Zack doing his own Elseworld over on HBO Max. It just has nothing to do with the DCEU. But everything else that's ever had a DC kind of live action kind of version, anything, Batman, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, anything DC live action can be deemed as canon. This is what they're going to do with Flashpoint. Flashpoint is going to have so many cameos from the DCEU, from Arrowverse, probably Smallville. Be very exciting to see how much they touch Smallville. But basically, with this Flashpoint movie and going beyond this Flashpoint movie, everything is fair game. So everything is canon. Anything live action DC will be canon. And for me, that's really, really exciting. Now, the burning down of the Snyderverse is going to be triggering and heartbreaking for me. You know that. You know who I am. You know what I stand for. You know I love Zack's 3 movies. I love them. They're amazing. He's a brilliant man and a brilliant director. And that's how I'm always going to feel. But I'm also a DC fan. Because if they can actually pull this off, it's going to be a really big advantage. Because then we get this shared universe full of cameos. As Ann Sarnoff said, a lot of that interview last week was quite toxic and triggered me, but the element of TV shows being able to cross over with movies and things like that, the things she was explaining in those terms are really exciting as a DC fan to me. But it's going to be bittersweet because this film, as I've already said, will burn down elements of the Snyderverse. Now, they're not going to burn down Aquaman or Wonder Woman because those things work for them as a business, as the normies like those versions of those characters. But then we have to ask the question, why are they resistant to greenlight Justice League 2 and Justice League 3 continuing from Snyder's universe? Well, that's really quite kind of simple because they want to do their own Justice League, right? But this is going to be a more interesting Justice League because this multiverse strategy means that different characters from different Earths and different versions of live-action DC can join the Justice League, right? You could get a situation where Robert Pattinson's Batman could be part of a new Justice League. They may even do a Justice League sequel to Justice League. So kind of will have Wonder Woman, Aquaman, right? And as I say, it could be a reality that Cavill's Superman or Affleck's Batman won't exist anymore. But I have a feeling Henry will survive. And I predict that Batfleck won't survive. This is what it's looking like. Not necessarily killing off Batfleck, but he'll just vanish from existence. So if he wants, he can be part of Zack's Elseworld. Because he may not exist in the central universe anymore, but he can exist in kind of the HBO world, if you want. HBO Max world, right? It's more than likely that Henry Cavill will survive. I don't know how this is going to work in terms of if Man of Steel's still going to be canon. It's all very interesting for me. I love talking about this stuff because it's fascinating. It really is fascinating. I believe that Henry Cavill will reprise his role as Superman in Shazam! Fury of the Gods and The Rock's Black Adam movie. I think that's when you're next going to see him. But I also think you are going to see him in Flashpoint. I think you're going to see all the Justice League characters as they were in Zack Snyder's Justice League and Justice League. Right, you're going to see those characters. Now, who survives and who doesn't is going to be very, very interesting. It could be a reality that all Snyder's Justice League actors survive, but with a slightly different backstory. So, you know, Flashpoint's a very interesting film. What's vital for Flashpoint is that it works for the whole of the audience, but mainly they're interested in the normies. They want a DC central universe that everyone's interested in, not a few people. Now, Zack Snyder's Justice League has complicated the situation because everyone decided to watch that. I mean, my Twitter's full of people saying, I watched it, much better than the original. And the original is the one that they want to use as canon. So it's a nightmare scenario. But partly it's, even though it is Warner Brothers Pictures' fault, all this happened in the first place, you know, if they didn't want Zack, they shouldn't have brought Zack to start doing stuff from Man of Steel. They made a mistake and they've been trying to correct that mistake all along. It's like kind of getting a plaster on a gaping wound. And every time you put the plaster on, the plaster comes off and you got blood all over you. That's what the DCEU has been ever since Man of Steel. Man of Steel is a great movie. BVS is a great movie. And Zack's Justice League are great movies. But the problem is for WB, they want to create a family franchise, a family-friendly franchise. And so it's very, very difficult for them. But by opening the multiverse, they can literally do anything. And anything that's ever been live action before, including Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern, can actually be canon. Now, this is what they're going to do. There's even rumours of Nicolas Cage's, cancelled Superman actually being a Superman in this world, in this new kind of multiverse strategy world, which for me, would be really exciting. And I think to any DC fan would be really exciting, an older Superman. And so there's going to be many versions of Superman. There's going to be versions of Batman. And there's going to be versions of these other DC characters. But you still have, as exciting as that is for the normie, because it brings different people in. By the way, this is a really clever idea by Walter Hamada and Jim Lee. I think it's a genius idea, but you do have to make it work. And, Walter Hamada has been very good at bringing in people in that can make things on a low budget. I think Aquaman cost a lot of money, obviously, but Shazam didn't cost a lot of money. Joker movie didn't cost a lot of money. Birds of Prey didn't cost a lot of money. And so they've been doing things on the cheap for the past few years. Well, a Flashpoint movie cannot be done on the cheap. People have got to be seen via Warner Brothers that this film's going to cost a lot of money, that there's no expense spared in this movie. Basically, look at Andy Muschietti Flashpoint movie as a crisis, a high-budgeted crisis on Infinite Earths, like the one we had with Arrowverse, right? That's what it is. You're going to get all these different versions. We saw Lucifer on Crisis on Infinite Earths, didn't we? Tom Ellis. We saw Tom Welling's Clark Kent. These are the things that you may see on Andy Muschietti's Flashpoint. It's a crossover of massive proportions. Now, the critics of this, the really hardcore Snyder fans, are saying this is not a Flash movie, this is just a crossover movie. And I understand what you're saying, but Barry Allen is still the central character, and it's about him. And Andy Muschietti has already said that as well. Of course, he would say that, but I expect him to stay true to his word. And so this is the situation. And then you look at the Snyderverse and the popularity of the Snyderverse now, and the Restore the Snyderverse movement doing so well. Over 1 million tweets the other day, right? There's no question here. If you restore the Snyderverse with what they're doing with Flashpoint and this multiverse strategy, how can you fit in the Snyderverse with this? And this is one of the reasons Sarnoff doesn't really want to get involved with the Snyderverse, because it complicates matters. If you're a company, well, we want it, but as a company, as an executive, it's really difficult for them. They don't want to over-egg the pudding. They don't want to confuse matters. But the problem is they also want to make money. And the Snyderverse has made them a lot of money, especially with Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. So then you have to find a way to explain and say that universe is nothing to do with our universe. That's just on its own. They're going to use the characters they want. More than likely, I would assume he's got to use Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa in Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. That's part of his vision. But this is what I mean. This is where it gets confusing, because they're either part of the universe or they're not. So they're going to have to come up with something pretty smart so people don't get confused. Is that Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, or is it a different Wonder Woman? Is this universe all connected? Can the Snyderverse be involved with the central universe, with the multiverse strategy? These are decisions that they're going to have to make. And it's difficult because at this moment in time, Man of Steel, BVS and Zack Snyder's Justice League are all right, Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't, but BVS and Man of Steel are kind of canon to the rest of the DCEU. And I mean, when you say Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't canon, WB, it's a bit difficult because, well, we know that Henry Cavill's Superman is part of the DCEU and Batfleck is part of the DCEU. So it's such a messy situation. And this is what I've been trying to say all along. So if Walter Hamada and Jim Lee can sort this out in a good way to please normies and to please the Zack Snyder fans, which I'm one, of course, but I love DC all around as well. So I feel that this is a great opportunity, if done properly, where people don't get confused. well, this is a multiverse, and basically everything is canon. Because the problem is, how do you burn down the Zack Snyder stuff? That's in Flashpoint. If that's the plan, to burn down certain elements. So basically, we've seen Zack Snyder's Justice League now. That's Elseworld. That's totally Elseworld. It may have the same actors as what we've seen in the central DCEU, but it's an Elseworld. They're different versions of those characters. That's something you're going to have to get used to. But because they want to keep Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman and Jason Momoa's Aquaman, then when you see them over there, somehow you've got to explain, well, they're the same actors, but they're not the same versions. You see how complicated. So if you like, what you could say is that Man of Steel, BVS, that's canon. That's canon. That doesn't interfere with the DCEU. But Justice League is canon. And Zack Snyder's Justice League is the beginning of Zack Snyder's Elseworld franchise. You could do it like that, and it's not too confusing. But when you do Flashpoint, you've got to do it in a way where the normie, what's a normie? An everyday fan who doesn't know what you and me do, who's not currently on the internet and doesn't know everything, has to understand what the multiverse is, that Zack's Elseworld isn't part of the central universe and they're different characters. These are the kind of things. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure. There's no question about that. And I've been fascinated and excited by this multiverse strategy from day one. And how they do it is going to be key if this can be successful. Flashpoint is about cleaning up a mess that was created by other people, right? Because when you bring in Zack Snyder to do something, to do a franchise, you've got to accept the fact that Zack's going to do what he wants to do. And it isn't necessarily pleasing on the palate of the normie, of the everyday fan, because they've been fed on the MCU, 20 years or whatever it's been now, right? Since 2008, so what's that? Yeah, over 10 years, whatever it is anyway, my maths is shit. But when people have been fed on the MCU, it's very difficult to convince them that a unique auteur director doing this is what they want to watch, because you have to be patient, you have to watch the next film and the next film for it to make sense to you, like Zack Snyder's Justice League is starting to do with the normies. Now they're starting to get it. Going to watch BVS. So it's going to all have to be done in a way that makes sense, because right now I think people are kind of really confused. And I think most people, normies, watching Zack Snyder's Justice League are just treating it as part of the continuity of the DCEU, which is exactly what Warner Brothers Pictures don't want. So instead of rebooting after Justice League, they've decided to do Flashpoint, burn certain things down they don't want to be involved with, and move on and have this transparent shared universe that's part of this bigger multiverse strategy. So different Earths can cross over with different Earths, different versions of live action characters can cross over. It's no holds barred. It's a very exciting concept, but it all has to be pulled off in this movie. And this, my friends, is what Flashpoint is. It's a new beginning for the DCEU. So, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad pretty much just carries on as normal. I would say, not canon for Zack Snyder's Justice League, but for Justice League. So that's easy to understand. And then Matt Reeves' The Batman, that's easy because that's not canon to the DCEU. In a way, it's kind of naturally fitted into the multiverse strategy because it's part of a different Earth, if that's true, by the way. Now, I thought at the beginning that maybe Pattinson was a younger Affleck, but that's not the case. That's certainly not the case. But that's something that they could have done if they wanted to kind of move out Affleck and have a younger actor. That would have made perfect sense, wouldn't it? And so, so that's easy, but it's when you get to Flashpoint in November of 2022. And we still don't know when Black Adam's going to be released. Will it be released next year as well? I'm guessing we'll have the Batman and Flashpoint next year. Then I think in 2023 would be a really, really good idea to have Black Adam and Shazam, Fury of the Gods on the same year. That would be poetic. That would be brilliant because they're part of the same universe. So that would be fun for David F. Sandberg and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And that would be an amazing year for the Shazam universe. So that would make a lot of sense. So I would suspect they're doing that. So I would suspect that we are going to get probably When is Aquaman 2 actually releasing? It must be 2023. So you could have 3 movies, but the future plan from 2022 or 2023 is 3 or 4 DCEU projects, whether they're HBO Max or the cinematic, the central kind of the cinematic way of releasing things. There's going to be a lot of projects, and I think that's going to start from next year. So that's really, really exciting. But it all rests, as we've discussed many times, on Flashpoint. Can they create a situation to clean up this clusterfuck? A clusterfuck going back because Warner Brothers brought in a director, a visionary they had no faith in. Not because they don't like his work. They respect him as an artist. That's why they negotiated to release the Snyder Cut. They understand the position he's in and the position they put him in, right? He didn't just turn up and start making his own movies. He was asked to. And it all goes back to the problematic situation of them bringing in Christopher Nolan to kind of godfather the DCEU because he didn't want to get his hands dirty. He didn't want to be the Kevin Feige. He brought in someone else to be the Kevin Feige, and that person made it problematic for the studio because of his unique, wild ideas, which I love, by the way, but they're not for everyone, and they're not maybe marketably palatable for the central audience. And this has always been the problem. It's not a personal thing, but it is problematic. So Flashpoint could be the film that puts the Snyderverse over on HBO Max and has this central multiverse strategy that can be really exciting. Or if they keep on ignoring Zack's world and say, we're not dealing with you anymore, then they'll burn him down, basically, and whatever else from his universe and just deal with this central multiverse strategy. But it goes beyond that. As I've already said, it has to work. And it has to work in terms of a movie that everybody understands. People must understand that if there's a Superman on this earth, there can be another Superman on this earth. J.J. Abrams is now developing a brand new Superman, probably a Superman of colour, which isn't Kal-El, by the way. It's a totally different character, and people are going to have to understand that. It's a lot easier to understand if the Superman is a person of colour and has a different name, because that's less confusing, right? Otherwise, you really do confuse people. So it's all on Flashpoint. If Andy Muschietti pulls this off, then that's a brilliant kind of coup for him, and he and his sister will have a big future within this universe. Because I think one thing's for sure, despite the issues within the DCEU, most of the films have made good money. Man of Steel at the time equaled the records of other standalone successful movies and even beat some films like Raimi's Spider-Man. I don't think he beat Spider-Man 2, but I think he beat the first Spider-Man, right? So at that time, before origin movies were making over $1 billion because of the MCU and their crossovers, right? That's what changed. That's what brought more money in. This is why Flashpoint is happening. Flashpoint is a movie it's kind of such a big crossover movie because they know this is what they're going to do going forward. Just like the MCU did. What the MCU did and Feige did was a clever idea. Put as many characters in as you want. It doesn't matter if it's this person's movie or that person's movie. Captain Marvel can have Samuel L. Jackson. It can have Clark Gregg's character as well. And things like it can have anyone, right? Just because it's your film, it's not your film. That's how it works. And people come in. The reason why Thor Ragnarok was so successful because Thor was there, but the Hulk was in it. That was a very exciting selling point for that film. And this is what Walter Hamada and Jim Lee are attempting to do. By doing the multiverse strategy, it enables you to do that. And the more we go into development and production of this film, we're going to hear so many casting and so many different iconic DC characters coming in that we've seen before, played by other people, hopefully played by those actors. It's a very ambitious idea. So that is very exciting. Now, my hope is that Zack and the DCEU can coexist, him at HBO Max and them doing their thing. That's the best way forward here. But it all depends on Flashpoint. Because if Flashpoint fails, Walter Hamada is out of a job. It's the end. And then maybe they may turn to Zack again. But you're looking at a bigger mess. Because, again, the consumer's seen another problematic situation within the DCEU. And ultimately, there's only a certain amount of time the consumer will give you another chance. The consumer's given the DCEU another chance after Justice League. and, they've seen Zack Snyder's Justice League and they've seen that situation redeemed, that gives the consumer more faith in the DCEU as a product and a label and a logo, if you like. And so now, if this film Flashpoint can work and create a happy playground for everyone, DC fans, Snyder DC fans, everyone, then we're on to a winner. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow with even more DCEU Daily. See you again soon.